Okay, hi, and welcome to the latest in the series, the Oren Marketplace webinar series, where today we hope to talk to you about the Internet of Things, about business digitization, and most importantly, about how technology can be used to drive efficiencies and cost effectiveness in the mining industry. The format for today's event is a panel format, so I'm joined by three very well-known IoT personalities, some of the biggest brains in the industry, and who I will introduce in a moment. One very quick housekeeping thing before we start. One of our panelists unfortunately couldn't join us today, so we are down a panelist, Gayatri Abbott, who's the Global B2B Digital Services Lead for Shell Remote Sense. But Gayatri is a fascinating lady who has a huge amount of knowledge around predictive and preemptive maintenance, particularly in the industrial lubrication and lubricant space. So if any of you are particularly interested in that area, I can't say that any of the rest of the panel will be able to step up and fill in the gaps. So please feel free to reach out to the team at Oren, and they'll make sure to get you talking to Gayatri as soon as she gets back on her feet. So with that in mind, I think we're ready to go. I will start by introducing the panel. The first member of the panel is someone I've known for quite some time, and he is genuinely one of the biggest brains I know in the IoT industry. He's also a gentleman who, no matter how many times I introduce him, I always mispronounce his surname. So I'd like to introduce the CEO of World Sensing, Mr. Ignasi Vilajosana. Hopefully I did that okay, Ignasi. Close. I'm getting it. Ignasi holds a PhD in physics and has received business training from Harvard Business School and the IESE Business School in the US. He manages the company with a focus on accelerating growth, evolving the overall strategy to adapt to the company's changing needs, and ensuring the maximum performance of business operations. His particular contribution to the company, and I think to today's panel, will be around his vision and technological expertise, and his understanding of the improvements in business processes and operational strategies and IT integration. So welcome, Ignasi. Good to see you again.
Pleasure.
Next up, we have Dr. Steve Liang, CTO and founder of SensorUp, a NATO award-winning movement intelligence platform that aggregates data from disparate IoT systems and transforms them into actionable insights. Dr. Liang is a global influencer on the Internet of Things, and he's a working group chair of several international standards working groups of the Open Geospatial Consortium and the UN's ITU-T. Additionally, Steve is a professor and research chair at the University of Calgary, the director of the Geosensor Web Laboratory, and the lab science of the Creative Destruction Lab. So you're definitely going to have to tell us about that, Steve.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Good to have you. And maybe before we kick off, you'll tell us a little bit about that, because that just sounds like the coolest lab I've ever heard of. And finally, our last panelist is Mr. Amit Rai, CEO of MachineMax. Amit has nearly 20 years of experience in the technology industry, having led teams at Microsoft, Nokia, and King, makers of Candy Crush. He's a serial entrepreneur. MachineMax is his fourth startup and came about as a collaboration between Shell and Boston Consulting Group. Amit has an MBA from the Harvard Business School and a bachelor's degree in computer science from the Indian Institute of Technology. So welcome, Amit.
I'm missing a PhD degree, it seems, but I'll work on that.
Oh, you're in good company. You're in good company. You're also, it being your fourth startup, I'm on number 2, and I still have at least one day a week where I feel like maybe I'm just getting a day job. So if you're on number 4...
You fail fast enough, then
yeah. Well, if you're on number 4, you're either very good or a little bit mad, one or the other. And finally, I suppose to introduce myself, I'll be the moderator here today. I'm Paul Glynn. I'm CEO at Davra. We are an industrial IoT platform company. We work across many, many verticals, typically working with organizations who are looking to digitize their business. We work with them to connect assets that never connected before, collect data from those assets, and turn that data into some form of usable business intelligence. So from a mining perspective, our focus is very much on remote monitoring of mine tailings storage facilities and other environmental hazards, which we do through a mix of ground sensor data and also through our partnership with the European Space Agency with some real-time Earth observation data. So that's that. But that's really probably all you'll hear from me today, because the rest of the talking is going to come down to you guys. Right. So I'm going to start with you, Ignasi, if that's okay. So as the first speaker, you'll get the dubious honor of maybe giving us a high-level introduction to what is the Internet of Things. Then maybe you can take a moment to introduce world sensing and explain what you've done for your clients to help them improve productivity in the mining world.
Sure. So, well, the Internet of Things is a quite broad concept, but to make it very, very simple, we can think on the, let's say, natural evolution of, let's say, connectivity and integration of devices into any object. So all the objects become, let's say, alive. And then after that, we can get a lot of information coming from them. And this happened especially over the last few years, as a consequence of miniaturization of technologies, the standardization of connectivities layer, and of course the increase of capacity of cloud computing and big data. And then the convergence of these three, let's say, pillars, So it covers the next wave of digitization. So we digitize first the computers, then the people, and we have a smartphone in our pockets. Now we go for the objects, and someday maybe we go for our cells and our and the atoms, whatever it is.
Well, we're not quite at that stage yet, but we're getting there. We're certainly getting there. We're starting to see it.
Sure.
So can you tell me a little bit about world sensing then?
Oh, sure. Well, world sensing, we were quite pioneers in that space in 2008. We created the company with the name World Sensing. It was already a vision on sensing everything, and nobody was talking about the Internet of Everything or Internet of Things. And we were born with a vertical focus. We are very much vertical in the areas of mining, construction, and critical asset monitoring, and what we provide is an end-to-end solution from hardware, sensors, data loggers with wireless connectivity, and all the tools to manage these networks, especially to manage, let's say, geotechnical monitoring for critical infrastructures.
Excellent. And in relation to your clients, particularly in the mining industry, can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the value that you've brought to some of those clients? Later on, we'll touch on some case studies, but just at a very high level about why someone would engage world sensing and what value you bring to the audience here today.
Well, what we are really addressing is the fragmentation of the technological value chain when it comes to monitoring their critical assets. And then climate change, institutional investors' pressure, new regulations, the fact that the huge impact that any mining accident has in communities, are putting a lot of pressures into the mining industry to keep their operations safe. It's not only to improve them, but to improve them while keeping, let's say, communities and environmental safe. With the addition of climate change. With all of that, the mining companies they have a clear understanding on the value of controlling the life of their assets, meaning their physical infrastructure. It could be the tailing dams, the open pits, the cavities, the access roads, the contamination of soils, etc. So, and to keep control of all of that, the most natural way to do it is to use sensors. They have been using sensors and manual readings for many years, but of course this is not scaling at the, let's say, dimension that the standards and the safety requirements need. So what we did is we tried to cover this gap, and that's why we provide wireless devices that they can connect to any kind of geotechnical and geophysical sensor to gather real-time data on the, let's say, status of any of the assets, communicate all this information in real time, and offer all this data to any visualization platform and data processing platform, so it can be used to assess the integrity of any structure.
Excellent. Thank you. That's fantastic, Ignasi. Amit, just moving to you. So can you tell me a little bit about Machine Max? And again, touching on that value question, try and explain to the audience what value you bring to them and why they want to bring you into their organization.
Yeah. So absolutely. So MachineMax is an equipment management platform. We are focused on the big yellow machines, typically yellow machines that you're likely to see on a mining site, excavators, dozer, front wheel loaders, ADTs, drill bits. There are lots and lots of heavy equipment on a mining site. And except the most sophisticated sites, in most cases, people find it very hard to have a real-time oversight of this equipment. As an outsider to mining, I still find it amazing that you can buy something worth $500,000 and not know where it is or what it is doing. So that is the problem we are trying to solve. And the Internet of Things is a very interesting analogy for us because first and foremost, we are trying to connect these big things to the Internet. And sometimes to connect these big things, we have to put a small sensor or a small thing onto it so that we can connect it back to the Internet, right? So that's who we are, an equipment management platform. In terms of the value add that we bring to mining sites, there are sort of three broad themes that we work with our customers on. First and the foremost is just helping them decrease costs of operating this equipment. This can come by helping them right-size their fleet so they can save on either CapEx or renting costs if they're renting machines. We can help them decrease idling. Idling is when an operator switches on the engine, it's burning a lot of fuel, but it's not doing anything useful. So this can lead to big fuel and emission saving, as well as extend asset life if we can help our customers do this, and also optimize operator shifts. There have been certain cases where we are able to show data back to a mining manager and say, actually, your night shift is not that useful. You might think about not doing a night shift. So that's number one, which is helping our customers decrease cost. The next thing is really about helping them improve equipment availability and safety. So now that these big machines are connected to the Internet, we can see how long they have run. We can then create time-based maintenance or planned maintenance schedules. We can help with condition-based monitoring or predictive maintenance. And we can also ensure that the equipment operates in the right areas at the right time, right? So that's really around availability and safety. And the final value add is around productivity, which is to make sure that we are identifying all the bottlenecks and then helping decrease the cycle time. So a mining manager can then increase the output using the same amount of equipment. And that really leads to an improvement in bottom line because all that extra extraction is going straight to the bottom. So those are sort of the key value levers, decreasing costs, improving equipment availability and safety, and improving productivity by connecting all the big yellow machines to the Internet.
Excellent. And I'm sure at a higher level, there are insurance implications and compliance implications around everything you do as well. So again, that's hugely important for the mining industry. Excellent. Thank you. And Steve, you're a little unusual in the panel that the other two guys have a hardware element to what they do, but you're purely software focused, Steve. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about SensorUp and again, how you fit in the IoT world or in the mining world, and particularly if you can focus on why geospatial is important and it's special in this context, because I think that's an area you understand to a level the rest of us just aren't anywhere near. So can you give us an idea on that?
Yeah, thank you. So SensorUp is a software platform. Okay, so actually I'm very, very excited to see both of you because I see great partnership there. So what is SensorUp? We are NATO award-winning software platform for Internet of Things, and then especially for movement intelligence, so locations, okay? So what do we mean by location? We mean where things are and what conditions they are in. And typically for mining companies or complex physical operations like military, the root of our technology is from military, yeah? So we won the award from NATO. It's called Secure Federation of IoT Devices. So it describes us quite well. We combine data from disparate IoT sensing systems, so it's sensor agnostic, using the international standards, which is I wrote several of them, and the world is following the standard. NATO, Department of Homeland Security, states. So aggregate different data together. So what does that mean? That means mining companies, right? You want to have visibility about where your things are, what conditions they are in, when are they going to fail. You want to have early warnings, right? And then you want to have this safety, okay? And so you install a whole bunch of different sensor solutions. However, they are better when they are together. And you do need this visibility cross platforms, right? So like Machine Max, they are best of the breed for this, right? For the yellow machines. And then World Sensing is the best of breed. However, in some applications, in many occasions, actually, you need they all together. Think about military or public safety. When you fight a fire, you want to have all the contextual information to tell you where are the danger, where are the people, you can save them, reduce response time, and from different sensor systems. That's where we come in. By aggregating this different sensor system using future-proof international standard, the world has been adopting right now, and then to have unprecedented visibility and early warnings. And we specifically focus on movement. So the value we bring in is really about, so think about your movement, right? So mining is about movement, yeah? Movement of equipment, movement of your earth, the dirt, and movement of people, right? So by aggregating different information together, we can really eliminate the bottlenecks, increase the throughput. So whenever you see any waiting, right, any dwelling, and that's where we can help. It's the movement intelligence.
Excellent. Excellent. No, that's fantastic, Steve. And I know you have a crossover. There's a significant AI element. People will have heard the terms AI, artificial intelligence, and a lot of people are confused about what that actually means. Can you? And people think it's much bigger than it is. People think it's a lot more complicated. Oh well, no, that's too advanced for me. Maybe you can give a little introduction or a little talk, to explain very briefly how that can be relevant to the mining.
Thank you. By the way, I'm also a professor. So right now, everybody, when you are listening to this, you have homework now, okay? There is a book called Prediction Machine, okay? It's a great book talking about AI. It's written by economists. So it's not a techie book, so highly recommend it. So we follow this thesis, okay? So AI is about predictions. And it's about empower the workforce of future to make better judgment. So you still need AI, okay? You still need humans in the loop. Okay, but you empower them to make judgment and remove them from repetitive tasks. So here's the framework. To train AI, you need data, right? And what does IoT provide? Provide you data, whole bunch of data, real-time data, and then historical data, so you can train your AI. So I encourage the companies, you look into your workflows, okay, and break into individual tasks and see which task you collect data and which task and you can train your AI. So basically make a prediction. Like when the machine will be failing, that's a prediction. But there are simpler prediction. For example, counting how many rocks in a given area. That's a prediction, okay? So that's the AI. And then you can use this prediction result, empower your workforce of future, which is AI empowered workers, and to make better judgment. And you have outcomes, better throughput, reduce response time, and you need to feed back into AI and to make your predictions better. So that's we call AI canvas. That's the workflow.
Really,
it's really about workflows and empowerment. Sorry.
And no, that's fantastic because it puts it in, as I said, some people overcomplicate AI, and it really is just giving yourself more information to make decisions around, which is nice and simplistic.
Human judgment.
Absolutely. And Ignasi, I know AI is an area you have some sort of thoughts around. Have you anything to add to what Steve has mentioned, or are you happy on that?
No, it's very interesting. So I think that it's the combination of, let's say, all the new data capture capabilities, like Machine Max or what we do at World Sensing, combined with, let's say, geospatial information or location intelligence, I like to call it. It's what makes it's what produces the operational value, for the mining and IoT. It's allowing to do that because when you think in a mine, so a mine is not a factory or let's say a nuclear power plant where you have a lot of homogeneous devices all together with electricity and connectivity. So a mine or a construction site is similar. No, you have a very large area with lots of heterogeneous devices, very sparse, normally without connectivity, or let's say, or normal connectivity, and without energy availability. Then I think that the reason why we are thinking in the digitization of the mining industry right now, or especially over the last few years, it's because we got the combination of this pool of technologies that allow us to do all this data capture and data transformation into information, no, and the need, no, and the need to do that in that industries, no. So that's what I see.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And you actually make a very interesting point. So Davra came to mining as a new industry. We weren't familiar with it. And it's very logical, but the reality is mines by their very nature are always changing. It's not fixed. And that's where constant flows of data and understanding changes in data and predicting the next step of stages of change is absolutely critical. So I think AI will feed into a lot of conversations for mining organizations. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, Amit, I don't want to be too negative, but I do want to talk about barriers and the sort of the downsides of IoT. And I know I'm probably being very simplistic if I say Machine Max are a fleet management company. And I know that's not quite where you are, but if I Google fleet management, I'm going to find thousands of companies. And the reality is they're not what mining organizations are looking for. These are people who manage buses and trucks and cars. So can you talk a little bit to the uniqueness of Machine Max and why it's relevant to mining and why it's important that mining people use, no matter what the area, the right tools from a technology perspective in just the same way they would use the right tools to, I'm going to be very simplistic, dig a hole. But talk a little bit about that if you don't mind.
I think that's a great question, right? And one which we are asked all the time. And one key thing is, we were talking about barriers of adopting IoT. And I always say to our customers is like, biggest barrier in adopting IoT is adopting IoT, right? And I don't want to be facetious here, but the real point here is no mining manager ever gets up in the morning and wonders, what, it would be amazing if I just had more IoT in my mind, right? Let me go to Amazon.com and buy some IoT. That's not what they care about, right? What they care about is end-to-end solutions to big bad problems they have. And going back to fleet management and lots of third-party hardware which is out there, what they do is they say, what, I have now connected this truck and I'll give you one data a day and I can tell you where this truck was at midnight. What use is that to a mining person, right? In most cases, if you're not running a night shift, you know exactly where the truck is at midnight, parked somewhere in not a very useful place. So the way we go and attack this place is really thinking about end-to-end operations, is thinking about sort of the vertical nature of the industry and say, what analytics and insights can we provide? What format can we provide it in so that not only is this helpful for a group mining director who's sitting at a company headquarters, but is also helpful for a mining supervisor who's on the site and is responsible for a small fleet of machines, right? So we do spend a lot of time not only getting the data, but then, running analytics on top of that, and then visualizing in a way so that that information is available to the human at the end, which Steve was talking about, so that they can take that action at the very end, right? And those actions is all around those things. Either you need less machines, you need to operate them differently, or at any given instance during the day, it needs to be in a different place than where it is, right? And those are sort of the analytics that we're feeding back to our mining customers.
Excellent. No, that's really good. Really good. We're doing pretty okay for time. So the next session, I would like each one of you to take maybe a case study, just a real life environment that will make sense to the people in the audience. Talk a little bit about what your organization have done, how they integrated with the client, what type of value the client got from. I know it's an extension of the earlier question, but maybe a little bit more detail. Steve, if you're happy to kick that one off, as I said, you have a couple of minutes. So anything where people can maybe see themselves in what you've done before and maybe get some ideas about how to start an IoT or start a digitalization process.
Yeah, sure. So the one question we ask our customers is like, how much value did you get from your location and IoT data? Okay. And then, so we have a real use cases like this. So one use case is about blast. So before they blast, they need to evacuate people. By knowing the location where things are and the people are, you can really increase the throughput and increase the safety at the same time, right? But like Ignasi said, there are just so many different moving parts from different systems all together, right? You might have different contractors. You might have different vendors, right? So how to put them all together so that you can really make the operation have this visibility, right? Glass is one example, right? So that you can increase make it much faster. And next one is we are working on a pilot right now for a potash mine, is to track the workers. By knowing where workers are and then their conditions as well, they have the wearables, right? And then we also connect to different systems, IoT systems, so they know where the assets are and what's the conditions and their fleets are. You can really give the right information to the right person, and so they can be more, they can reduce time to find things. They can know the context to know that machine, the operational condition. And also know the location of the workers so that they can keep them safe, reduce response time. That's the other one we have quite concrete, but it's all centered on locations and the conditions of their contextual information, their environment. And those data are from other IoT systems.
No, that's excellent. And it's interesting because it reminds me of a story that one of my clients mentioned to me a number of years ago, where he said, we have a $5 million piece of machinery driven by a guy who earns $5 an hour, maybe not even $5 an hour. And that person didn't have the love of the machine maybe that the mining company had. So a lot of what you're talking about allows the mining company to extend their view right into the cab and understand how the machine has been driven and when it's been driven and where it is. And as you say, if it's parked somewhere it shouldn't be, what was that about? So yeah, that's good. It's good.
Yeah, send warning before the person head into a place that typically do not go. Right? That's one function we have in the system, right? So predictive about location, right? Location can tell you a lot of things.
Excellent. No, thanks for that, Steve. That's good. Ignasi, the same from you. Do you have specific use case or a case study or a customer you'd like to talk about that maybe some of the audience would see themselves in?
Sure. Well, we have more than 700 implementations globally of our technology. Today we are in the top 96 mines from the, let's say, major mining companies. And I would say that the killer application of our technology is monitoring of tailing dams, which is a very hot topic today with the release of the ICMM standards, new regulations in Brazil, for example, and our technology, it's quite well suited for this kind of application because the wireless nature of our devices allow to deploy hundreds or thousands of sensors along the tailing dam, and then all our, let's say, connectivity and the way we manage connectivity allow to scale the networks. And with that, we provide real-time data for the, let's say, connected to the main IT systems of the mining companies that they have. It has to be like this because they have to report to the authorities, to regulatory bodies in real time. So we have several examples. Brazil is a market where we are growing quite a lot. Now we have implementations of hundreds, if not thousands, of devices covering, let's say, quite large tailing dams. And normally the value proposition for the client is that we let them be compliant with the regulation. So we let them capture data in real time in unprecedented scale. So normally we don't talk about the cost of doing and implementing our technology, but we talk about the cost of not doing the implementation of our technologies. But if we think about the operational cost without considering any, let's say, the need not to expose any person to a potential collapse of a tailing dam, it's about 30 to 40% savings compared to traditional monitoring systems, and maybe 4 or 5 times more data and in real time. And the benefits are quite obvious, but the challenges are obvious too. You were asking Amit earlier about the challenges, and what we see, and it's very interesting in mining, is that decision making is done at mine level in many occasions. It's a super fragmented market, and then IoT programs are transversal and global. Then there's and the more mature is an IoT solution, the more vertical it is. In fact, I was one day listening from one very good expert on the field. He was saying that when IoT matures, it dilutes in the sector, no, the solutions. So that's what is happening. That there's decision making is taken locally to address one business problem. Transversal programs don't look at the specific verticals. Then there are a lot of challenges to scale the deployment of IoT solutions in the mining industry. That's the main challenge we are facing globally, and I'm sure Amit and Steve, you are feeling the same thing. Then which I would say it's not easy, but is let's say doable to deploy one set of technologies into one mine, but to kind of let's say become an integral part of the operational management technology of a mine. This is the biggest challenge, no? And this is because there are no holistic, let's say, digitization programs from a vertical perspective. No, then I would say it's the combination of the OT, IT walls. So OT drive adoption, IT has their own mental schemes. The solutions are in the OT, but with a lot of IT flavors. Now, that's the challenge we see. We've seen that in 96 mines already. We know mining companies, they are addressing that very quickly, to be honest. But this is one of the main challenges we see.
If I may just add to what Ignasi said, right? I mean, this fragmentation of decision-making, local decision-making versus global decision-making is quite interesting, because one of the challenges we see is it also adds to very difficult behavior change, So I'll give you a specific example. We were doing a pilot with a pretty sort of large mining company in one of their pilot sites. So they picked up, one of their best persons and said, this guy is sort of an achiever. He gets digital technology. Why don't you do a pilot with him and see if we can see some benefit coming out of the site? And if he can show the ROI, then we will scale it globally, right? So we said, fair enough, makes sense. Let's go work with them. They worked with us for 3 months. At the end of the day, we went to this person and said, what do you think about Machine Max? And he said, you guys are amazing. I'm going to write a very nice letter of recommendation to the group mining director. So he wrote a very flowing recommendation, but there were no numbers in it, right? He was like, it's easy to use. These guys are amazing. I said, all that is fine, but the key task here was showing ROI. He's like, look, I can't really talk about ROI to the global mining director. I said, what do you mean? You have seen all these benefits on your site. Why don't you talk about this? And he goes, well, the way the mining industry is structured, the first thing is, if I share this with my global mining director, the first thing he's going to say is, what the hell were you doing for the last 20 years? Right? Right? I thought you were a great guy. Maybe not, right? And he said, I don't want to take that risk. And the second thing goes is, and by the way, based on all the optimization, they will cut my budget, but not the budget of my peers, right? So I will be at a disadvantage to using this technology. So as a result, I can say sort of generic good things about you guys, but not get this number. And that is just crazy, right? And going back to Ignasi, because you have this different way of adopting technologies where individual decisions are made at a mine level, but then they have to convince the headquarters to push the technology everywhere else, it ends up becoming really, really complicated for people who come from outside.
Yeah, and we see that across all industries. And mining in particular, and I think the heavier grade industry where it's expensive to change, it's even more difficult. And sometimes you get a really successful site, a mine or a factory or whatever, who don't want to talk about the success because they know it'll be taken away from them, and they know, well, it'll be standardized and then I'll have to do it their way. And I absolutely understand that. But it's from a pure mining perspective, I don't think that's unusual. I think all organizations and everybody in the audience here now will understand that level of sort of, I suppose, corporate pressure and who needs to protect who. But ultimately, I think all three of the companies here have really interesting and strong use cases that can't be ignored. Ignasi should say, obviously everyone has heard of like what happened in Brumadinho, and that sort of sent shockwaves throughout the industry. We certainly saw a lot of involvement with investors suddenly started to get interested, and the pressure came from the top down, not from the mines up, but from the investors. Like I heard some anecdotal evidence that the Church of England are an investor in a number of mining companies, and they're forcing the companies to make decisions and to use technologies like the guys in World Sensing have. So maybe that's what will happen, is the pressure will come from the top down. But fundamentally, the technologies are all sound and they're strong, and they offer a lot of value, not only to the companies, but specifically to individual mines. And Ignasi, we're definitely going to have a catch up, because everything you're doing on the ground, we're doing from space with the ESA guys. So we do need to catch up. But that's a different conversation. And Amit, just back to you in relation to a particular case study you have, or a particular mine you'd like to talk about.
Maybe I can give sort of a couple of short examples. Our technology is available out of the box, so you can start to seeing the benefits almost immediately. So we always focus on those three things: productivity, improved availability / safety, and cost. So a few things. I mean, billing is one thing where a lot of our customers have seen benefits. Quite often there are contractors or vendors, and they use their equipment, and the billing is done on the basis of the number of hours that equipment has worked. No surprise, we were working with a large mine, and once they started seeing our data and they compared it with the handwritten or paper data that was coming from the contractor, there was a big gap, right? And immediately they were about to say, look, we trust this data, we're going to pay you on the basis of that data. And that was sort of a 10 to 15% reduction in contractor costs, literally overnight. There has been another case. This is more about productivity. I am constantly surprised how much amount of inefficiency there is, because the loading point is constantly changing. It is very hard for people to optimize even a simple thing like, loading shovel to dumper ratio. You go to a mine and they have a rule of thumb, 1 loader to 4 dumpers. And now we have been in many places where they're able to see quickly, actually the dumpers are constantly waiting. I need to either reduce a dumper or add a loader here. And that helps them immediately increase productivity by 20 to 30% almost on a daily basis. But probably my favorite example, it's a very small impact, but I really like the story behind it, is, we started working with a mining client, and they were really closely watching the shifts. When does the operator start? How long is the break? And then one of the top performers, they noticed that he had started taking a very long lunch break. He was supposed to take a lunch break of 1 hour, but this guy was doing like 1.5 hours, and he was like really extending it. So the mining manager, thought he's going to go investigate. And what they quickly found out was the reason he was taking these long breaks, was where he was operating. It was really far from the little canteen they have in the pit. And he was spending all the time walking back and forth in the cold. And that was actually hurting the productivity. So what they decided is, for the next 2 weeks or so, when he was supposed to work in that area, they got the foreman to ferry him up and down using his 4x4. And an amazing thing, and you can literally see, he made this decision. Next day, the lunch break went back to 55 minutes, right? So not only do you get half an hour of additional productivity on that shift, but when, it decreases the fatigue, and overall sort of improvement in operator satisfaction is amazing. And all they needed for that was the visibility into the location and what their people are doing. And that is what we can enable on these sites.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You see, unlike the three of you, I'm a sales-based CEO. I'm not an engineer. I don't have your brains. I wasn't born with the brains you guys have. So I'm a sales and marketing guy. And when I talk to my customers, I'm always looking for those little nuggets. That made a difference to that person, which drove productivity at this level, and then we rolled it out more and that came to this. And things like what Ignasi is saying about the dam tailings, that's key. Forget about everything else they do. There are lots of solutions for mines, but the key thing is monitoring those dam tailings. So I like to cut through all of the great technology and find out what difference does it make on the ground. They're fantastic stories. So thanks, guys. We're getting close to the end. I'm conscious there are 2 big topics we haven't really touched on today, both of which could be topics unto themselves. One is a very imminent one that we're all dealing with at the moment, which is COVID. And the other is a broader one that I absolutely guarantee the Oren guys will want to do a separate session on, which is cybersecurity. So I don't think we have time to drill into either of them in any detail, but if any of you have any thoughts or comments or just information for the audience just about maybe how to use technology to help get productivity back on track after we come out of these COVID restrictions, or potentially just key pieces of information around cybersecurity that you'd like to throw out to the audience? As I said, we don't have a lot of time to drill into it in detail, but any key nuggets you think will be relevant? Maybe Steve?
Yeah, maybe let me start a little bit about COVID, because I just had a panel discussion about COVID this morning. Actually,
you're an early riser.
So COVID actually it's really about knowing the risk of the people to people and people to place, right? Place including a machine, right? When you know the exposure and where you spend time and the conditions of the people, and then you can calculate the risk. And then the management level need to know that risk to know when to ease, where to have a more isolation, right? Or more, how can they make a decision, right? Ease the restriction or make it more strict. And it's a information gap problem, and IoT and AI really help that. So in a way, COVID is pushing digital transformation and connected workers. So this morning we talk about the genie is out of the bottle, because the things we haven't done before, and a lot of things, force us to do. So a lot of companies start to see the value of these connected workers. And then employees see the value about flexibility and empowerment. By using this IoT and data, I become more empowered. I can do my job faster, right? However, I also sacrifice a little bit privacy. So in a way, I think the world is changing now, and the genie is out of the bottle. Okay, so it's really about how to empower the next generation workforce, and to balance this, privacy, productivity. And also there is a external force about the shortage of skilled workforces in the future. So in my opinion, it's really about, for mining industry or oil and gas, right? It's really about, let's focus on make the next generation workforce safer and more productive. So back to my thesis about using AI so they can make higher level judgment and capture that experience and knowledge and make your AI smarter. That's the right model. Of course, you need to combine different sensors networks together, because data are better when they are together.
Excellent. No, that's great insight, Stephen. You're right, it's about the people. Both COVID and cybersecurity are people issues. Mm-hmm. Ignasi, have you any comments on that, closing comments?
Very, very short on COVID. I fully agree with Steve, that's the point. I tend to say that we were born as companies in the age of operational efficiency, and COVID transformed our era to the resilient operational efficiency. So it's not only about improving operations right now, it's to make them very efficient, but as well as resilient, as efficient as possible. No? So that's a fundamental shift in the way businesses, especially in mining and construction, will need to operate. No? So you cannot stop operation independently, whether you have people in the field or not. And this is, I think, a fundamental shift. No, we are going in a visionary vision, more visionary vision. No, we are going towards, let's say, full remote mining operations, and at some point, asteroid mining or astro mining, etc. And most of the operations will have to be remote. So this is the beginning of a new story in mining. No, and security. Just a very quick one. I think it's fundamental. Let's say element that it's one of these elements that is a game changer. Or either IoT solutions are secure or they will not stay. So I think that the industry has to take this very seriously. We are doing that, and many companies we know they are taking security on device security, communication security, data security as such. GDPR is helping European companies to do that, because we have quite a lot of pressure to be compliant with quite a lot of standards, and time will say.
You're right. Things like GDPR has forced European companies. I think others and regions, countries like South Africa have huge compliance. Probably GDPR is based on the compliance structures from South Africa, and they're way ahead of the rest of the world. So that side will be particularly interesting to watch. Amit, it's fine. We'll wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, just in COVID, what's been interesting to see in the mining sector in the last just couple of months is they're all coming around to the point that they cannot avoid technology. They cannot just trust the boots on the ground, because you know what? In certain cases, you cannot have the boots on the ground. So you've got to adopt technology, especially, as Ignasi was saying, you need resilience in the system. Your supply demand tends to vary so much that you can't really deal with all that uncertainty unless you have the technology. The second thing, hopefully, and this is more a hope for the mining industry, is that they should see with COVID that technology is not scary. I can't tell you the number of times I've had conversations with mining companies where they say, I love what you guys are doing. I have a plan for rolling out, your technology really aggressively. We will pilot in a mine for a year. If it is successful, we will go to a country next year, to the region in year 4, and to the globe in year 5. And I said, by year 5, I'll be dead, right? Why can't we do this faster? No. Technology adoption takes, this amount of time. And then suddenly all those guys have had to switch on a simple thing like Microsoft Teams overnight, right? And now they can see the technology can work. It is not that scary thing. So that's my hope with COVID is, it will really accelerate that digital transformation, but give confidence to the people. Not only is it useful, but it's no longer scary.
Excellent. No, I mean, that's fantastic. And I think it is interesting that everybody talks about the people and how it is. Every element of all our industries is about the people. And it's funny because as Steve was talking, I noticed I had a message from one of the backroom staff, and I missed that when it came in first. And I think it's interesting that the technology is here. It's designed to make life easier for us, but I didn't see that because I was doing something else. I was listening to Steve. He was very interesting. I was writing stuff down. I was also writing down when Ignasi talked about asteroid mining. I didn't think that's where we were going to end up today, but I missed it. And I think that's something we do need to take into account when we look at introducing technology. That, like, a lot of the organization, a lot of the people in the audience are working for companies that have decades or even centuries of experience in mining. They understand their industry. They understand the mining world far more than most technology companies will ever understand it. So it's important not to think the technology just replaces everything else. It doesn't fix everything. Yeah. I like to tell a story. My father was a fitter in a chocolate factory for 45 years. His entire career, he worked fixing machines in a chocolate factory. And he would say that he could walk into the factory, just from the sound, he would know whether it'd have a good day or a bad day, whether productivity would be up or would be down. And over time, the younger guys coming in, they had computers and he said they didn't use spanners and screwdrivers. They had their keyboards and they were monitoring for alerts. And he would say, what's wrong with machine 7? They go, oh, it's fine. No, everything's green. It's good. And because the technology told them it was good, they didn't listen to the noise. They didn't say, no, that's not right. So I really think it's important for the audience here to realize that you have a lot of really good people. You have a lot of good knowledge, tribal knowledge, as we like to call it, that just technology will never, ever replace. So use the technology to complement it, not to replace it. The 4 of us here want you to use as much technology as possible. We want to drive the digitization of your businesses, but don't forget what you already have and don't throw that out. So I think time-wise, that's probably a good time to wrap things up. I'd like to thank the team at Oren for setting this up and for putting it together. It was fantastic. I'd like to thank the team at BizClick Media for organizing all the backroom stuff. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the panel. So Ignasi, Steve, Amit, thank you very much. It's been really, really interesting listening to you all. Cheers. Thank you.
Your pleasure.
Thank you.